morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's show. I am, as always, super excited about my guest today. We did have a cancellation, so for those of you who are here to see Julie Holiday, she will not be joining us today, but I have rebooked her for later this fall. So make sure you stay tuned if you wanted to see her and ask her questions. But today's guest is just as amazing. I've been looking forward to talking to him. So I was glad actually that we kind of had that cancellation. But feel better, Julie. I'm sad you're not here, but I'm also glad you're not here because today I get to bring Ron on and talk about some amazing things that I have had questions for him for a long time. And I suppose I could have just emailed him, but what a better way to ask him his questions than actually bringing him on the show now. So welcome, Ron. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Opportunity comes sometimes with a lot of preparation. Sometimes it comes up on short notice. It is of equal value to me either way. This is really cool to be here. And I've got to say, completely off topic, I don't know if that's a stained glass wall thing or window behind you. That's awesome. That's really beautiful.
It's a backdrop.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah,
very nice.
It's a backdrop. Yeah,
nice
and
it's I like it.
Because I ordered it and I didn't realize it, but on the top over here, there's actual cobwebs hanging on the books.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know that when I ordered it, but I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's really nice. I wasn't sure. It's a well lit, so I wasn't sure if that was actually the behind you. That's really nice. Wherever she is, she lives in a cathedral.
I know. Oh my God, I love that. So anyway, I'm super excited to have you here today. I know our topic is going to be ITC and, of course, talking about Staticom because I have a lot of questions about that as well.
Me
but
too.
One thing I like you to, one thing I do like my guests to do is kind of introduce themselves to my audience to kind of give them an idea of who they are, where they came from. And, of course, everyone's question is, why the paranormal? What got you into it?
Well, who I am, written right there, Ron Yacovetti. I'm in New Jersey right now, which was a really cool place to be up until 24 hours ago when it started pounding snow, which we really haven't had this year for the most part. I started investigating anything paranormal as a, 101 ghost hunter, like many of us start. Mm-hmm. When I lived in Los Angeles, I was in California for 14 years. I lived out there. So I started, I would say 2012. So probably, about 12 years ago, mm-hmm. give or take. And I was always fascinated with this stuff. Anything you name the show, if they, the $6 Million Man, I know I'm dating myself, had a Bigfoot episode, or, if they were Abbott and Costello reruns, meet Dracula, or like anything that had to do with like what was considered mythological or supernatural or spirits and ghosts. Like it was just intriguing to me. So I always liked it. I probably had, and I wrote about this in, I think my first book or the second one, I probably had a couple of things happen when I was younger that I didn't connect the dots that they would have been considered maybe something anomalous. Mm-hmm. At the time, especially not having any education in this stuff and being a child, which now I'm probably just a bigger version of a child, but not the same child. And, you kind of like just pull up the covers and go, no, that couldn't be, whatever. And so I probably had a couple of things that I didn't realize at the time that would have, at this point, I would have been like, hey, wait a minute. How did that, or why did that happen? So that's where the intrigue came from. That's where the seed came from. What happened was when I lived in LA at the time, when I had gotten separated and divorced, and my ex is one of my best friends, as is her husband, and my girlfriend and I are very tight with them. It worked out very nicely. So see, if you act and think positive, people, it can work. Mm-hmm. I started dating somebody and we didn't agree on anything to watch on TV. We were just like, no, 800 channels. And then all of a sudden, boom, Ghost Adventures. You'll watch that? Started watching. They had local events at some of these locations that they went to on the show. And we went and got asked to be on a team, which I thought was awesome to be a team, really. And the fact that this stuff was even available for lay people or anybody to get involved with, I thought was intriguing. So we started doing it. What along that path shoved me, I will say, because I don't think it was even subtle, into the real-time communication ITC side of it, or which is instrumental transcommunication, was me and the lady I was seeing at the time, and it was like 30 something people. Glen Tavern Inn, Santa Paula, California, third floor. It was an investigation public event. I don't know if you know the late Debbie Constantino.
Mhm.
There, Chad Lindbergh from Fast and Furious, amongst I forget what the show was he did with John L. Tenney. He was there, and it was a Spirit Box SB7 session on the top floor. Everybody introduces himself. Last two people do, and then Chad goes, hi, my name is Chad, and it was maybe 20 seconds, give or take, and a voice came out of the little speaker and went, "I know Chad," and I went, "Whoa, what is that? What is he using? And how do I get my hands on one of those?" I was fascinated, and as much as EVP to me prior to that, and still was almost like the benchmark for like the wow factor, right?
Mhm.
Speaking thin air, nobody's there, nobody answers, and there's a voice on the recording. When I saw this and I saw real time interaction, I was like, "What? I didn't even think that was possible." So now, which was really cool, by the way, because we went to an expo in 2021 out in Las Vegas. I got to tell Chad the Chad story. So I told him, I said, "You're the reason why I'm so deep into this ITC stuff now." But that started me out on that. And then we can get into other specifics, but then flash forward, I started learning as much as I could about how it worked. And in today's age, there are some of the most brilliant people in the paranormal field who are building devices, ghost boxes and otherwise, which is phenomenal that there's this grassroots technological boom that's happening in what used to be a don't talk about it taboo field.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And it's funny, you and I, even though I do use ITC communication now and then, you and I are like complete opposites of the spectrum. I prefer my non-tech tools. People always laugh at me because I come in with my fidget spinners. and that's my way of communicating.
It has to have value to you. The lady who mentored me in the direct radio voice, Dr. Annabelle Cardoso in Spain, incredible, beautiful soul. She and everybody who pioneered ITC and EVP research, the people who actually pioneered it, Konstantin Rauderbe, Friedrich Jurgensen, the father of direct radio voice, Ernst Minkowski, physicist who came up with the term ITC, Robin Foy from the Skull Experiment, Marcello Bacci, who most famously made ITC and direct radio voice famous, the Harsh Fishbacks in Luxembourg who did direct radio voice, Hans Otto Konig. She sat with all those people. This is the lady who mentored me into it. And she used 3 radios to do direct radio voice on different AM vacant channels. Just that was it. That was direct radio voice. That's at its core. And one time she asked why the spirit kept coming through the one radio the most. And then the response she got was because that one's your favorite. Mm-hmm. So when you come into your things with the tools that you like using or that mean something to you, there's a good reason why that's why they're effective. And it's something you stay with. Right.
Exactly. And then the one question before we go into Staticom that I always get asked, but I don't always have the answer because I don't consider myself, outside of being able to turn on the spirit box and using it. Actually, people want to know, a lot of questions that we get on the shows that I do is when you have the spirit box going, how do you actually determine that it is a voice from the other side versus a whole bunch of, radio station or even audio pareidolia?
That is such a good question at the absolute perfect time to ask it, because I would want to address that before explaining Staticom, because some of the things that Staticom entails procedurally are not part and parcel with the process of spirit box or ghost box communication. It's different. So I will answer that. So, and I don't build them. I learned how they work. I have friends who build them. I wanted to understand what it was supposed to do, what the methodology comes from, where it comes from, who. And I looked at this as something that's being done by people who build them now. I mean, if you can name Austin Maynard, the Holtes, but Katie and Katie Stafford, Jay Prather, William Pemblot, John Huntington, there's people who are building these things who are brilliant, and they're doing it at the level that is unparalleled. Even I would say, including Frank Sumption, who's the one who started this whole ghost box or sweeping radio revolution. So I knew that I was not going to be sitting here with a soldering iron. If I was, I would be high-fiving you with fewer fingers. Mm-hmm. So I did look into different ways of studying or maybe contributing and learning ITC, maybe some way I could help forward it. Like I said, contribute to advancing. So to answer the question, the box itself, the sweeping ghost box modality was created. The idea and assumption came up with it originally for communicating with extraterrestrials was to fragment broadcast vocals, which are in audible tones, for the purposes of spirits being able to manipulate the fragments of the vocals to create words and stuff that we would be able to understand. Some people will say that it was meant for speech to come out between the broadcasts during the sweep, which is almost less coherent than the first part. So that's the idea. Now, I know academia looks at this methodology-wise and says that this is not reliable. There's a lot of false positive possibility, audio pareidoia. I think to a great degree that's true. It is very much like if you ever seen people go in those little booths that have cash flying around and they're trying to grab things with this big fans moving it. That's kind of what it's like. If you're really being distracted by imagine there's all $1 bills and there's a $5 million check in there, right? You're grasping for that one thing that means the most, but you're getting distracted by all these other things that are getting in your way, going where you're reaching. So it does have that distractibility to it. And it does have phonetics and stuff that are part of it from the process. However, I think that the first mistake with Ghostbox use that people can make from an outside perspective is to take the onus of responsibility or discernment off of the operator. That is primary. So if you have these in your hand and you say, what am I holding? And clearly enough, not like, but like clearly enough, glasses comes out. That's got timing and relevance. And for us, that's the measuring stick that we use to vet whether we think something's anomalous and legitimate. Because the odds are astronomical. If a radio station said glasses at the time I held up glasses and the DJ's not clairvoyant, then I need to know when they're giving away cash because my luck is unbelievable.
Right.
So timing and relevance is your measuring stick for using those. The discernment does belong on the operator. And one of the things, it's funny because we've been speaking to this more. We've been adding a vertical of philosophy to our ITC, which is very different for an ITC person lecturing, to include a substrate for the presentation that is philosophy based, but also trying to dispel. There's a lot of axiomatic thinking, these things that are just accepted in the field without question or without really knowing why. Mirrors are portals. Okay. I see kind of where, but I've never really heard a coherent explanation, something that was tenable as this and this and this and that, even if it's rooted in scientific, fact or theory or something. And if it falls apart at some point, it's still an attempt at putting it together. One of the axioms that we have in the field is that the onus of responsibility for the ghost box is not on the operator. So when you go on a website to buy like a spirit box as an accessory, one of the things they make available to you is a Faraday pouch.
Yep. And
it doesn't block the radio. It conducts the signal around the box to keep it from going to the radio. So my first question is with this is that you bought a radio and the first thing you're trying to do is make it not work like a radio. It's like buying a lawnmower and having feathers put beneath it where the till goes. It's not going to do what it's supposed to do. But people will put this in the Faraday pouch to rule out false positives. This is where the responsibility is on the operator. Then they'll run out a little 3.5 millimeter jack wire to an orbital speaker outside of the pouch. Well, now they've just reestablished. You're laughing because you know where I'm going with this.
I know.
They reestablished the antenna. You just create this. Old radios had wire antennas. You just reestablished it. Even the new Spirit Box Pro, which looks fantastic, has a button to shut the radio off. Or the antenna, right? The reception. I don't understand that. The methodology itself is predicated on fragments of vocals from chopping up the broadcast band. Right. So why would you want to, otherwise, what are you doing? You're sweeping white noise at best. And there's no tactical advantage whatsoever to sweeping white noise. And if you're just using white noise and you're not sweeping, direct radio voice, which predates the Spirit Box, the Frank's Box, the Ghost Box. So see what I'm saying? Like, I don't understand. And people will do that everywhere. They'll run the speaker wire out. They'll shut the radio reception off. It doesn't make sense that you would do that. But So that's my answer with that. How they work is the same theory behind why we think what we do works with regards to the white noise. So Staticom is a name that we've given this between Tony and Sheree Rathman and Lourdes Gonzalez and myself. But procedurally, what this is it's direct radio voice that we'd evolved, and then we renamed it because we removed the radio from the process, and I'll explain that. Mm-hmm. But essentially, direct radio voice, like I said, was just pure white noise.
Right.
And I saw these guys like Marcello Bacci in Italy getting unparalleled communication. I've never seen a ghost box do what he did with a vacuum tube radio. With all our tech and our spring reverb and our LED lights and stuff, that was amazing to me. So I looked at Lourdes and said, I don't know why nobody's doing this, but I want to try this and see if we can do it. So we think that the reason that ghost boxes have success and work, but they have shorter messages or there's a brevity to the messages, is because the process, the method itself, we think truncates it, because we don't think they're using the vocal fragments. And even again, another criticism from academia is if you have to have allophones and phonemes, certain little fragments of sounds in certain places at certain times to form certain words when somebody certain wants to say a certain thing, that's right. It's they're not like playing Scrabble at a crackhead alarming late putting sounds in place. It's almost not tenable to even think that's possible. So if they're not using the vocal fragments, then what is it? And why would the messages also be shortened by process? And we think what it is, it's stochastic and sometimes inverse stochastic resonance. White noise, every frequency, 20 hertz to 20,000, we can hear. Something enters into that, resonates with one of those two get bolder. The rest of the white noise stays even amplitude at a spectral frequency of 1. Mm-hmm. So now it's detectable. We think that's how the ghost boxes work. And Lourdes is a court reporter by trade, so she had noticed that a lot of times with spirit boxes, voices would come in soft. You would be struggling, competing against the of the sweep to hear it. Other times it would come in so loud you wouldn't even hear the sweep anymore. It would replace it, and you just hear the two words or whatever came out, because that's wherever it resonates in the white noise is where it's coming in at. And it may sometimes intersect with the decibel level where broadcast is coming in, but it's never consistently there. And we don't think it has anything to do with availing fragments of sounds, randomly thrown together. So we think it's purely resonance. Two of the ways we figured that out and why we changed the name to Staticom is that we did a zinc mine in New Jersey under the surface of the earth where cell phones and radios and their signals go to die. Spirit boxes were getting nothing. Mm-hmm. We got voices, and we were using a shortwave radio station vacant for white noise as a source, and we got vocals. Our partners in Arizona, Tony Rathman, did a demonstration at a Paracon in Arizona, and he did what I thought was a ballsy move. He used a sleep machine instead of a radio, which is pre-recorded white noise on a chipcorder, not live white noise. And what happened was that he got a vocal response. It worked, and he got 3 words. But then every 3 seconds, those words came around again. Because if you've ever seen like an EVP, when 4 recorders are in the same room, only one person gets the voice, it imprinted on the chipcorder the same way the white noise was originally recorded, even though the device is not made to record. So basically, some spirit cost him $24 on Amazon, is my point. He can't use it anymore. But it proved that RF signal carrier wave radio reception was not a necessity. And that really cemented for us that it was resonance and white noise that was causing it. Mm-hmm. So why Staticom? Staticom because in an effort to vet the authenticity of what we do, to not fool ourselves, let alone anybody else, we looked at what are the low-hanging cynical fruits that we can take out of this equation. What are the pitfalls that are probable to fall into, right? And with everything from audio pareidolia and stuff like that, from having broadcast vocals and everything in that, one of the first really 2 main cynical things that get slung on ITC are radio leakage or bleed through, right? That you're picking up radio stations, you're hearing DJs and all that kind of stuff. So we removed the radio. Now we're using generators that make live white noise in a closed circuit system with no ambient point of entry, no microphone input. So that's off the table. The next thing we got that will happen sometimes with ITC, and this one was fun, was that these are warbles and artifacts of sound. And to the depth and clarity in the characteristics, we've had audio engineers look at the characteristics and tonality and vocal depth of the consonants, vowels, diphthongs, cadence of speech. It's spot on. We've had investigations with speech pathologists that we know, spot on. Court reporter, right in my house. So she's not an audio engineer. She can't tell you how it behaves and what audio does, but she listens to different dialects, languages, cadences, tones, accents, talking over each other. So she identifies speech quite well. So we looked at that, marvels and artifacts, and we went, well, the reason that people will say that we're getting or hearing what aren't language or words in white noise is because people will say that white noise is random, that you can always discern patterns in randomness. But the problem is first of all, to say that is an appeal to our intellect, right? If we can discern patterns in randomness, that's how we communicate. That's how we identify speech when we hear it. We don't hear sounds coming from an animal and think, oh, they just said, get the keys to the car, right? And pareidolia also seems to only be predatory on the paranormal too, right? If this is something that we're having happen at such an alarming rate that none of this paranormal audio evidence is legit, where are the documented cases of pareidolia affecting people in day-to-day life? Are there people getting called into the supervisor's office and they go, you're fired? And they go, what? A raise? That's fantastic. I'm sorry, pareidolia, my prescription ran out. No, there's no data to suggest that. So it's absurd. So we looked at the two things for ITC, right? I remembered where I was, which is rare at this time of day. Radio bleed through. We took the radio out. Now we're using a generator for white noise. Discerning patterns in randomness. And the problem with that theoretically is randomness, random, is really an empty drawer. It's what we say when we can't measure or calculate something. White noise is not fundamentally random, right? There are electromagnetic fields, quantum fields, ions charged from the sun. There's a variety of things environmentally that could be and are affecting it, intent, right? But we say random because at the time it's almost inconceivable, if not completely inconceivable, to think that we can measure it. So it's not random fundamentally. What it is, it's computationally irreducible. It can't be calculated at the time, but it's not random. So we took that off the table. So we don't really have an anchor to hold us down as far as something we can't explain with, a cynical point of view. And the only thing that's left is hearing fallibility and pareidolia, like I said. But again, it seems to be very specific in its afflicting paranormal audio capture, but not day-to-day life.
Right. Yeah. I think that's mostly because either people don't want to believe, or that the evidence we have gotten so far is so faint and not 100% clear that people can make different meanings from each of the words that are said.
That's true. And you know what? And I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that we always try to point out is keep your eye on the ball from phenomenal experience perspective, right? If you say something now, and I have 10 people in the other room, and 3 of them heard the same thing I heard, but a couple of them didn't hear it, and one of them not sure what it was, it does not change the fact that what just happened was speech, was intelligent, conversational, discernible dialogue with context and syntax within which we comprehend. That's what happened. And that's the part that gets lost because people go, well, you do academic studies and you'll play audio capture and 30% of the people will hear the same thing and 60% of them, hear something different. And then the other percentage of people didn't. This shouldn't be there. It shouldn't even be there. And with what we do with pure white noise, which is devoid of data, there's no audio. There's no receiving a signal. It doesn't record. So there should be nothing at all. So when you hear what sounds like speech, even if it's not the clearest, and let's be honest, I pay Verizon pretty well for a cell phone every month, and I can't always understand the people that I talk to. So if it's some kind of realm or interdimensional thing, the plans are still rolling out. It's still fairly new.
Right. And the other thing I found interesting is you talked about using the spirit box inside a mine. That is something that we did just before COVID hit, so several years back. And we actually were invited to investigate the Florence mine. And we went down the big mine shaft and then also into a collapsed leg of the mine, and
Mhm.
we got our best spirit box evidence on there because we didn't use the spirit box often just because of the radio noise and, you know, the headache to listen to it on replay over and over. But we brought those down there, and the evidence we got was the best we've ever had using it. So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We when we did it in this, it was a zinc mine in New Jersey. They were trying to run SB7 experiments and nothing would come through. And I know when I wanted to hotspot my phone for something, and I had to walk all the way out of the mine, all the way around, dripping ceilings, all the way around, and go outside just to be able to do that, and then go back. I couldn't get signal for anything. There was no radio, nothing.
Yep. Yeah, we had that also in Gold Point, Nevada. It's middle of nowhere, no radio towers, no nothing. And we had we turned the spirit box on, and it was almost like the spirits knew what it was, because a lot of investigators go out there, and we got like hello, hi, and 7, male and female, different voices, and they just were like trampling each other trying to get to the spirit box to talk to us.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the stochastic resonance I was talking about before. I think that's how the boxes work. I wonder sometimes, because of the sweep, if messages are coming in longer than you're able to get because it's already cycling through the band and you're not getting to hear the whole thing.
Right.
That's different. Yeah. What we do is that there's no sweep involved. It's literally like an open channel. And we've recorded voices 1 minute and 8 seconds at the Shanley Hotel in Napanoch, New York, on a rant, the same voice for 1 minute and 8 seconds. I've never seen a ghost box do that. So it's interesting what it's opening up so far, possibility wise, and we don't know yet what the limitations are on it, but we're working on it.
Right. Yeah, I know. What was the Jeff Bent? I don't know if you know that name.
I do.
We were hosting an event in Henderson, Nevada, because we lived in Vegas for a while, and it was a fundraiser for a local museum. And a girl brought in this big box, and she's like, she introduced me to the idea of what she referred to as the Fent box. And we had some interesting evidence come from that. We had actually most of our evidence for the night came from that device. And it was interesting because when we were asking questions, it turns out that it wasn't a spirit at the museum, but one that is attached to the device because I guess he uses recycled wood.
Ah, okay.
And it's a spirit that came from an old barn that just is now hanging around this box wherever she takes it. So it was kind of interesting. But again, it was some of the best evidence we've ever gotten in an investigation.
Yeah, no, the boxes work. I own a bunch of them. They absolutely work. I just think that the efficacy of the method, which is regardless of the builder, has nothing to do with the builder.
Right.
You can have the most technically sound auto builder, and if they take a horse and carriage and try to soup it up, it's never going to compete with an Indy race car. It's just the mechanism itself. So I think that just if people watch, there's a documentary called Calling Earth on Vimeo, and I think Afterlife Investigations, which is about the skull experiment, but I think that also has an element of it that has my mentor, Dr. Annabelle Cardoso, in it, and it shows Marcello Bacci. There's a 45-minute, I think, documentary. It was done in French with subtitles in English about Marcello Bacci. And if you see what this gentleman did with just a vacuum tube radio and pure white noise, it's staggering. And I've never seen a sweeping box produce what he did. Like, it was like you and I are talking. We're still working on trying to get to that Edison's phone to the dead level conversation with this, but he did it for 20 something years, and it was amazing to see. And it shows the power that we both benefit and suffer from, of media and television breaking open the doors for this to become more acceptable, because with that, a lot of opportunity for a lot of us to have a platform and to be doing podcasts and stuff like this. But by the same token, it also opened up other avenues. So there's a little good and a little bad that comes out of it. Fent, I know of, by the way. I met him almost briefly in Gettysburg. I've heard nothing but good things about the stuff that he builds. Again, I think that the boxes of today are probably better than even when Sumption was doing them. It's the people who are building them are taking it all to another level. Yeah. I just felt that the method itself, the sweeping modality, was where the limitations were clearly not with the builders, not with the intelligence and technical prowess that these people have. It's not them. But I do think the method has limitations to it that direct radio voice, which we've now converted to Statacom by not having a radio. So we took DRV as a name and figured, well, there's no radio anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the method is a little bit more permeable.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And that's what I love about what you guys are doing, because I've always said that about the paranormal field is it's one of those things where for those of us who are in the field, know paranormal activity happens. That's answered. We don't need to prove that it happens anymore. We need to move on and try new things. You know, you can only ask, who are you and where are you from so many times.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's only so many times that you can do an EVP session. You know, we have to try new things to actually get that scientific data to back up the fact that paranormal activity does happen.
First of all, the fact that you said that I love. I will come back anytime just because of that. It's so important. And so one of the interesting things is that in the last year or so, I have a background I have a bachelor's in communication. I studied a lot in media and public speaking, as well as philosophy. I did stand-up comedy for a number of years, which satire, or being a satirist, is somewhat of a philosophy. You're looking for hypocrisy, continuity of thought, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So those things combined have really been a cognitive plus for me. Like it's put me in a different space with this stuff as we go forward. And over the last year or so, and in the last couple of months, I've dragged my girlfriend Lourdes and some other friends of ours we started looking at philosophy as a foundation for what we do, because, and this is what I love that you said that, we know this is real, right? So the first thing we need to do, I think, is if you're going to say something is real or not real, is have an understanding of what you think reality actually is. Mm-hmm. And I don't think most of the paranormal field sits back and looks at that. We just already know with comfort that, like you said, these things are happening. We're not crazy. We get it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think we lose the argument a lot of times when it tries to go to the scientific level, is because we are paradoxically trying to defy and adhere to mainstream materialism or physicalism as a foundation of reality. In other words, this stuff is paranormal. It's supernatural. It doesn't get stuffed into the box of physical science where everything's measurable and right. But then when we try to prove it or explain it to people who aren't in it or don't believe in it, we try to cram it into that box to prove it. So we just said it doesn't go there, and now we're trying to put it there to prove it. But what if there was a different mindset for reality? And what we had adopted as a foundation, it was called analytic idealism, which is to say that reality is mental processes, that everything starts, all we can ever know is experience. And it starts with perception. So it is not to say there isn't a world out there and that it's all in our heads. But physicalism or mainstream materialism will say that there's a physical 3D world out there that we all share, and that our brain creates consciousness, and then through that we perceive it. And that's why it's the same, because we're perceiving what's really out there. Analytic idealism says that there is a world out there that we share, but it's mental. And what we perceive as reality or as physical is not the thing itself. It's a representation of what actually is. It's different. And why we adopted this, and as the more I educated myself and learned it, I realized that theory must fit the facts, not the other way around. And it seems like what we call the paranormal, and we have to prove and explain, like you said, we no longer have to do that this way, because it makes what is paranormal natural. It's nature doing what it does. It's a different thing to get your head around, because we're used to this physical world out there that we measure. But without measurement, there's no physicality. And the idea is that reality being all mental. So the modality for it comes from clinical studies, which people know from multiple personality, or now it's called dissociative identity. So mind at large, or universal phenomenal consciousness, is this one cosmological entity of everything, right? Which some people might have a religious connotation for. And we are alters of it. Just like a person who would have multiple personalities would have individual personalities within the one. So we're each alters. We have our dissociative boundaries, and we have a dashboard of perception comparable to like an airplane. Pilot will be in a plane. He's got a dashboard of dials and needles. It tells him what's going on around him through sensory input so that he can navigate. You black out the windows, no problem. He can still fly and land the plane. Mm-hmm. Sensory input, salient points needed to navigate life. That's what we get, right? It's an interface. You go to your computer, you click a folder, it opens a folder. You click another folder, there's a little file, you double click it, it opens up this video, there's sound and light and video and everything. If you had to see and experience every line of code, every codec, every extension, every part of that, your head would explode. We would be in tropic soup. We would just dissolve. It's too much. So we get in that interface only what we need in the experience to navigate it. That's the model for what we think reality is that everything is mental. And we only get representations of what is, not the thing itself, because that's all we need to navigate life. And so we're just dissociative states, and we perceive the other person's dissociative boundary. And that's the extrinsic appearance of who you are internally. Mm-hmm. And the boundary is why we can't, even though we're part of the same universal mind, you can't read my thoughts or make me think something, and vice versa. And even if I wasn't here, your thoughts would still exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the model for analytic idealism. And I think when we adopt that, you look at some of these things that happen, everything from NDEs, out of body, remote viewing, gleaning information at what's superluminal speed, right? You ever ask a question with a ghost box or anything and the answer is there immediately? It's not traversing a distance. That's faster than light. That's superluminal. But if you're part of universal consciousness, if you are an alter of it with a dissociative boundary that through impingement can receive information, then that answer was already there. It didn't have to travel a distance. See how it makes a lot of these things that we deal with, and it dispels this idea that material science uses against us to vet what we do by saying that consciousness is created in our brain. I remember I took my son to a virtual reality place in Manhattan, and you put the goggles on, and you're walking on the steel girder, hundreds of stories above the city, right? If your brain was both creator of consciousness and phenomenal experience or qualia, qualitative experience, you would know with complete comfort, you're on a carpet, you're in a facility, you're not really over the city, you're safe, right? But you don't avoid those feelings. You get vertigo, you feel fear of heights, you feel off balance. It messes with you because perception comes first before measurement, perception. And it's giving you on your dashboard of dials the real perception that you're experiencing that. So it would be a different experience, I think, if your consciousness was created from the same place that was reasoning out what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, I know one of my goals, which I don't think will ever happen in my lifetime, is, and I always tell people that even though my goal is to make the paranormal world almost like a real science that people turn to, it can't be science like biology, chemistry, or anything like that. We have to almost create a whole new category of science in order to understand the scientific end of the paranormal field.
I think, and this is what I love about philosophy, because the different physics is in the business, and physics is really like the grand poobah of the sciences, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Even with biology, you name it, everything kind of almost always answers up the ladder to physics. Physics is in the business of being less wrong. Mm-hmm. It tells us what nature does. It tells us what nature might not do. It models behavior. It doesn't tell us what it is. It doesn't tell you what it is like to be something, right? The sweetness of a strawberry, the taste of chocolate, the fear of something, to feel love. Those are not quantitative things. You can't measure those things. So physics can't speak to those things. And that's what's called the hard problem of consciousness, is where those things cannot be reduced to a smallest, common denominator. And so the idea of analytic idealism as a philosophy versus mainstream materialism, which when people refer to science and the paranormal, that they're referring to materialism, because that's kind of, since 17th century pre-enlightenment, that's kind of what stuck with us. It was conceived to keep scientists from being beheaded and burned at the stake. And then it kind of just carried over generation to generation. So now we're vested in it. But they knew even back then that it was not tenable. Mm-hmm. But it was a survival mechanism. It was a weapon against the church, so they ran with it. Mm-hmm. But under that as a philosophy, then the paranormal would never need to be its own science. All of the things that we know about physics and biology and engineering, all these things are not in conflict with analytic idealism. All these things are completely allowable. It just makes it natural. It's what nature's doing. And that's
Mhm.
part of, I think, us figuring out, and it's a different mindset to try to redefine reality as mental processes. I've been doing it for a year and a half or so, and I had some background study in philosophy. So it's still, because you're so used to adhering to one modality of thought, but it really does make you think too, that we do this a lot we'll label things with proper nouns as
Mhm.
things and give them standalone existence, like we do the physical world. Like you go like this, right? And we'll ask people when we lecture, and there's a Dr. Bernardo Kastrup who will do this. What is this? It's a fist, right? Where did it go? It was
Mhm.
never a thing. It was a doing. This is a
Mhm.
behavior of your field of subjectivity. It was never an actual thing itself. We confuse sometimes causality and correlation to explain, right?
Mhm.
That's what they'll say with brain activity, is that you have brain activity when you have phenomenal experiences like love and stuff. So therefore the brain's creating these feelings. But you can also correlate a very large fire with a fire truck and firemen, but that's not to say that they're the cause of it.
Right.
It just correlates. Of course, there's brain activity when you have phenomenal experience, because that is through which we process those feelings. And that is the extrinsic view of our brain from across a dissociative boundary. So of course
Mhm.
there's activity, but it's interesting that in studies that were done with psychedelics under medical treatment in countries where it was legal, the most visceral and heightened experiences that people had consciously had the least amount of brain activity.
Hmm.
When mediums go into trance, they have the least amount of cognitive measurement. fMRIs, EEGs, they have the least. When they're supposed to be processing on a higher level, which if the brain was a creator of that consciousness, you would see a correlation, and it doesn't. It
Mhm.
doesn't happen. And
Yep.
dissociation for us is powerful too. There was a study by Victoria Schlimp, I think 2014, in the Netherlands. There was a woman who had 5 alters, which was used to be multiple personality. Now it's dissociative identity disorder. She had 5 alters. 2 of them claimed to be blind.
Mhm.
When the blind alter was in executive control of the physical body, the visual cortex in the brain had no activity.
Hmm.
As soon as one of the other alters was in control, everything sparked back up.
Mhm.
Organically, the rods, cones, eyes, cornea, everything was fine. So
Hmm.
that's the power of dissociation for us being part of a greater thing as individual alters. It really is.
Right.
It's
Yep.
powerful.
Exactly. We do have 2 quick questions because time flies by. Only
I
15
know.
minutes left.
And I'm chatty. Todd. Why does that name sound familiar? He's one of the him and his wife Carmel are 2 of the nicest people
Okay.
on the planet.
Yeah. He mentioned he had I think earlier he had mentioned he had the day off and he's watching today. So thank you, Todd, for watching. But he says he knows Staticom uses filtered white noise and no radio waves. Does the frequency of white noise come through at a particular number that is a sweet spot to speak that may make it easier for the spirit to come through?
When we started direct radio voice with an old world band radio, we did use 222 kilohertz. After moving around the dial a little bit on vacant channels, that seemed to be a sweet spot for us. When we went to a generator, which does not receive signal and it's just pure white noise, we don't filter out any of the white noise. There are, I'd say, maybe 1 or 2 components in the chain, because it's a software filtration. It's a digital audio workspace that has a variety of components that are literally Frankenstein monstered together in an attempt to try to just clear up the vocals without causing any contamination internally, which it doesn't. And so there's some level of filtration, but we don't have a honed in. I don't think it'll ever be honed in on a specific one frequency. We may sometimes, through like a process in audio, it's called a band pass, maybe lop off extreme highs and extreme lows,
Mhm.
where we feel like, interference may, be like almost like a bursting of sound, maybe if you get some kind of interference. But for the most part, now that we have a closed circuit with a generator, we don't really see that happen. It did a little bit with the radio, but no specific frequency. I mean, we're using most of pretty much what white noise avails us to, which is everything we can hear. And part of the issue with this is that we don't know anything about the source or from where the vocals come, which is another one of those axioms, right? When people go, what's the ghost frequency? What frequency are the spirits on? We can have an idea where we or how we, through frequency, are best able to hear or attain them.
Mhm.
But from where they come or how they transmit or however this works, we don't have access to where they're starting, to the origin point, to be able to have any kind of calculation or measurement to what that is. The axiom that I find interesting in that too is, again, the kind of continuity of thought with this. Most people in the paranormal would agree that they would say, well, the spirit realm doesn't have time, space, as we're stuck with it. They're not bound by time, space. And then they'll say, well, what's the frequency? I think I'm going to figure out the ghost frequency. But frequency is what? Frequency denotes a measurement of time. It's oscillations per second. So if they don't have time in the same way that it's measurable for us, how do you have an application of time as a yardstick that would be an equivalent to the way we would measure it? See what I mean? So it's not, theoretically, it's not tenable. It's missing something. Yep. We can speak to the receiving side of it. It's almost like I'll give you something football related. Super Bowl just happened. You got a receiver running downfield. He looks up and there's the ball coming in from over his shoulder. He doesn't see from where it's launched. I mean, he knows it's coming from somewhere, right? But at that moment, all he knows is that here it is, and he's receiving it. That's kind of the position we're in. Like we're not privy to the quarterback and where this thing is launching from, but we see something coming our way and we try to do the best we can to receive it and make this something that we can kind of hold on to, sink our teeth into.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. It's interesting because then my question from you talking with that is, I'd ask the person, how do they know that the spirit realm isn't restrained by time?
Right. Oh, and that's
I'd like to know where that theory came from.
Yes, and that's my point, is we need to question those things too. That's one of the reasons why string theory kind of doesn't hold up, because you'll hear people theorize about string theory and what it does to quantum mechanics and everything, but nobody ever tells you what the strings are. What are those strings? What it is in material science, these are convenient fictions. These are things that they use as an explanation for what it seems like nature does, but then they don't have to explain what it is. We had somebody on a podcast just recently when we were explaining that billions of years of whatever evolution, we have sensory input, right? We've evolved sensory input like the dashboard of dials. And we were talking about how we think when we ask spirits, what color is my shirt? What color is this? Or what am I holding? That when they give us an answer, I feel like they're grokking that information through us because we're connected through impingement to universal phenomenal mind. And if we have the information through our sensory input on our dashboard, we are how nature is seeing life through us. So we're contributing to that collective. That's how I think they do it. And the one gentleman was like, well, spirits can see frequency and they can report back colors and sounds. And he never said how. How, without the sensory, billions of years of evolution to evolve sensory input for us to have, if we are spirits in a physical form, right, as we say, why evolve mechanisms through which sensory input would filter if through spirit it's covered? Yep. Right? It's not coherent. It's there's something missing.
Yep. Excuse me. And I do have one more question from me before I get to Courtney's question. We will get to your question before we go. Is one thing that we have been experimenting with is the idea of almost like our thoughts are going on to EVP recorders, or they're coming through on spirit boxes, which is the whole theory behind the Estes method. But what are you guys doing any research along that lines of like us actually answering the question and not the spirit? But it's
we have. There's been early ITC research. I think it's in at least one of Dr. Ana Cardoso's books. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Friedrich Jurgensen, who's the pioneer of direct radio voice, spoke to it. I don't think that's what's happening. I think a lot of times information comes through that's either proprietary to somebody else. It has to do with jargon or specific vernacular that we don't have, information about places or things we don't know, dialects. I mean, there's different senses of humor. There's so many things that come through. I don't think that it's feasible that it's coming from us. From a practical point of view, if there was instances within which that we were able to somehow telepathically transmit our thoughts to come through the radios so that we're answering ourselves, right? Sometimes we don't ask for answers and they come through. Sometimes the answer you expect is not what comes through. Sometimes there's multiple people in the room. Now, what governs whose thoughts trump whose as far as what comes through? Why don't they all come through? And it's this completely unintelligible audio mess, right? So there's a lot of holes in that. If we were able to do that through radio, Are there any documented cases of somebody driving to work, listening to their favorite tune, thinking in their head, God, I hate my boss. I hope that guy doesn't show up today. And all of a sudden through the radio in the middle of Miley Cyrus, it goes, God, I hate my voice. I hope he doesn't show up today. Whoa, that was me. Has that ever happened? I don't know that it has. I won't say that it hasn't. But this is continuity of thought, is to assume one of these things. You have to look at all the other theoretical dominoes that would have to line up for that to be, as a theory, coherent. And if it falls short somewhere, then you need to look at maybe why. I don't think that's what it is. But what I do think, and this explains everything from NDEs to remote viewing, is that if we are alters of a collective consciousness, a universal mind, through which we can input and receive information through impingement with our dashboard, right, then I think that information could be had that's sourced from us, like what color is my shirt? If I ask it, it could be sourced from us or from somebody in the environment who's contributing to it. There's been NDE experiences where a woman was reporting a shoe boot on the roof of the hospital. Now, even during the moment, people whose cognition was in full function, who were in physical form, working on doctors, nobody was looking at that. Nobody saw it. But as long as somebody at some point had contributed to the collective of collective consciousness, having seen that thing, it's there. And somehow, from being maybe in that location, she was able to access that information with never having gone onto the roof of the hospital. This is in a clinical paper, I believe. This is documented that it happened. So I think with communication, with ITC or even EVP stuff, I don't think that we imprint that stuff. And I know I've had in the past, I've had people say, well, it could be you because the Philip experiment. And I just saw an academic paper come out recently that mentions the Philip experiment. So I looked at the Philip experiment, and you know what they didn't get at the Philip experiment? It was a bunch of PhDs and masters and engineers up in Canada. I think it was in the 70s. They didn't get audio capture. There was no EVP or no ITC whatsoever. So using that as a substrate of an argument to disavow any ideas of paranormality with spirit communication is absurd, because it doesn't have any place in the experiment. And what I found fascinating was that the people who conducted these experiments, the one big hurrah they had was at a theater. They did this very formal seance-y kind of thing. It was mood lit. They had cameras in place, and they did create phenomena, right? They had tables levitating, all this stuff happening, but the table levitations, all that stuff at this big event, they didn't capture it because the cameras weren't capable of recording in low light. This is in the 70s.
Right. Night
vision or IR was capable or attainable, at least initially, I think, on a military level, like in the early 1930s or 40s, I think. So this is a bunch of people with high levels of education who didn't know that they either needed to get better cameras or turn on a freaking light.
Right.
You can't record in the dark. You're creating phenomena, and you're not going to make sure that you capture it.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said for the layperson, because a lot of us who are not PhDs or masters, in earnest to have as much verification for what we think is happening, at all costs, we're trying to capture stuff. So I just thought that was fascinating that part of it never really gets talked about, but they missed the opportunity.
Yeah, no, I do a lot of research on the Philip experiment because I find it interesting. But, even just listening to you talking, and I've noticed that there are gaps that are missing. So I keep researching it, hoping that I find.
If you do, please let me know. Please let me know, because there was no audio capture whatsoever on it. And the fact that they couldn't document on camera phenomenon that was manifested through their experiments, to me, is absurd. That's paramount. That you're able to document that, and that's the backbone of all this work you did to show something, and it's not viewable because it was too dark.
Right. Yeah. I know there is a book. I think the wife of the person running the experiment wrote, because she was part of it as well.
Okay.
But on Amazon, it's several $100s because it's like 1 of 5 available because they've all gotten destroyed or gone missing or.
Check eBay every so often. You'll find I got a couple of books that were a few $100s each for less than $100. When sometimes people have them and they're just selling books and they don't realize that it has any value in a certain niche.
Right.
Keep your eye on eBay. Yeah.
I'll have to keep. I actually sell some of my older books that I don't use on there for just 99 cents for someone who may need it.
Yeah.
but I never even think of looking there for myself.
Yeah, I have some of those because
Mhm.
you can find them really. I said some of those books, Vertical Plane by
Mhm.
Was it Ken Weber or Webster? I forget. The original print went out and it was $900 or something,
Yeah.
even on eBay to find it. And I got somebody in UK, I think, that was selling it for like $98 or $112 or whatever. And I went, yeah, oh
That's one of those things, even if you turn around and sell it yourself, because the value type of thing.
yeah.
I'm going back to Courtney's question real quick before I lost it in the shuffle. There we go.
Courtney
Looking back
P.
at how DRV has evolved from when you first started to now, how and what would you like to see Staticom become in 5 years from now?
I'd love to see Staticom be what the Rathmans and then Lourdes and I have talked about, which is the closest thing to the idea that Edison had for a phone to the dead, or with communication with those that are discarnate, that aren't in our physical existence as we know it. I do think, especially through the ideas of analytic idealism as a philosophy of mind, and then what we're doing, that this stuff not only seems natural to happen, that I think that we can continue to improve on it. And that's where I like to see it. I like to see it to be as open a process as possible, and we do everything we can to not fool ourselves, and not let cynicism be what, because it is an obstruction for a lot of people with that. You get hit with these ideas or these questions, and so to be able to at least address or speak to them as best we can, and for expertise that we don't have. And this is how sciences are across the boards. It's got to the point when there's so many granular levels of study within all these different phenomena, or just within everyday life stuff, that people have to sometimes begrudgingly bring in other areas of science and other experts to speak to stuff, because it's just too much ground for one person to cover. So we have had audio engineers look at our stuff. I've had somebody go, well, you're not an audio engineer. I'm not, but I'm highly educated from a layperson's point of view in these things. And for the stuff that I can't answer, I do know people who are audio engineers who are open-minded to looking at data and not filtering out information because it doesn't fit into their paradigm. So then they just exclude it, and that's a problem with the world instantiation of science and bias.
Yeah, and that's one thing that saddens me about this field is how much evidence has gone to waste or has been deleted because someone didn't think it was something.
Yeah, and that's part of it's an educational process overall for both sides of that issue, right? To know that it's something not to dismiss, and to not let somebody's dismissal of it be what governs how you look at it. Because there are people who are so grounded in their bias that if Bigfoot handed them their car keys, they still wouldn't believe them. You mean they couldn't get any more real than that? And they would still be like, no, come on. They'd be looking for the zipper. Where's the suit?
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah. But proper skeptical parsimony is not about declaring things to be impossible. It's making sense of reality with as few postulated theoretical entities as possible. And succeeding rather in explaining reality with less theoretical entities, we realize that what materialism, which is what we're governed by, considers to be anomalous, which is why we're always trying to prove it, is in fact entirely natural. And again, this is, I think, a problem that we all deal with this stuff, and when trying to justify what we do and why we do it. But I think that, again, philosophy, we have this neo-priesthood of society with self-help and gurus and coaches and stuff, because philosophy is missing, culturally missing. It's really not a thing so much now. Physical sciences and stuff is really what, when people refer to science and the paranormal, nobody's referring to philosophy. They're referring to really to physics, quantum mechanics. That's what they're talking about. But philosophy is where you look for meaning. Physics is where you look for behavior.
Right.
And so I think that would be cool to infuse some of that philosophy into it, because even as ideas of what you think reality is, if we think about that more, it is most parsimonious. Materialism or physicalism that we adhere to now says that there's mind and there's matter out there.
Yep.
Analytic idealism says that everything is mind. One thing. Universal phenomenal mind. We are alters of our own minds. More parsimonious. And it allows for all the things that we know from physics, and it allows for qualitative experiences. It doesn't have the hard problem of consciousness to answer anymore. But how do you reduce to the constituent parts love, sweetness of a strawberry? It doesn't have those problems that physical science has. So that's part of our goal now with our speaking stuff, is to try to influence thought. Again, we're not preaching that we know. This is what we learned. We all learn it from somewhere, what we know, and we hope to learn more. But we're trying to institute through our speaking a platform of philosophy to look at what reality might be, and then look at the stuff we do in the paranormal field and go, is this really paranormal or is this normal?
Right.
Because now we have an idea of what we think reality is.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. But oh my goodness, I can't believe time went by as fast as it did. I will definitely, I know, I'm actually going to rebook you when I told you I had openings in August. So I'll get the date in August back to you to see if you can do it. And then also, just from talking to you, I do want to get everybody who's involved in Staticom on a Ghost Education 101 episode.
It would be really good. Yeah. Lourdes Gonzalez, my partner, has been phenomenal with this process. And she has, and if people bring their own little things from their own lives or vocations, the court reporting thing, what she does with listening to linguistics is, when I tell you she hears everything, I won't say anything that she wouldn't like or bad if she's in the house. She hears everything. Yep. Tony and Sheree Rathman have been huge influences, and just recently Tony made a breakthrough in vocal quality and what we do at Staticom. So, and he has a perspective. He was a ghost box builder for 11 years. Remember I said I had never been a builder. He built them really good, one after the next. Never sold them, was always for research, which I kind of admired. Yep. So he'll have a perspective also on spirit communication, that is in large part in league with I do, but I have some things from my toolkit, especially with philosophy, that come from me, and he has things that come from him. And he's somebody who I've learned from as well. But I think that would be great. They would love to be on it.
Yep, definitely. And I think we have some open dates coming up that weren't quite filled yet. So I'll get to you with that. And then one quick question before I do close out is, Daniel wants to know, is it possible to purchase Staticom?
I'm glad he asked, because we've had a lot of people recently come to it. At some point, it's funny because we would do this at places and people go, where do you get that device? Where do you get that box? And box is so ingrained in our psyche as ITC, because Spirit Box, Ghost Box, Frank, everything's box, right? It's a methodology. It's not a device or a box. A lot of the parts or components that built out the interface some of them are available for free from audio software components. Some of them we licensed. So I don't think legally we can license or sell other people's licensed property as constituent parts of our own, creation. And we would have thousands of licenses in our names if we built out and did that. What we're looking at doing at some point, and we're still trying to figure out when, because this was not conceived to go to market. This was done purely for research. But when we started bringing it out in the field, these questions came up, and justifiably, if I was on the other side of this fence, I would be asking Daniel the same question. So the idea is, I think what we're going to do is we're going to probably put a mapping together as a consult. And we'll have a website page with videos. Each component will have a picture of it. It'll show you where all the settings are. It'll have explanations for each thing. So that's going to take some work to put together. Some frequently asked questions, maybe some, help videos to answer maybe common issues or questions. There's going to be some level of onus of responsibility on whoever the operator is, because sometimes if you have technical problems with your computer, you could lose the voices. You could have a conflict where your computer's picking a different output, but your digital workspace is picking a different output and you're not hearing anything. So there's going to be some of that, like we can't geek squad the entire community of paranormalists. That was also part of our concern, is not having the time or the manpower to do that. So we're thinking it'll be a mapping that we'll sell as a consult. They'll lay everything out, where everything is set, and how to put it together. And then we will try to help with with it as best we can. And we're looking at the when part of it, because a perfect example is, imagine if I had sold this to somebody for $500, $1,000, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks ago, and it works.
Mm-hmm.
Within the last 48 hours, Tony Rathman had made a developmental change. He changed almost 50% of the guts and glory behind how this runs, and it made a measurable difference in vocal clarity. It
Okay.
really did. So now you would have just shelled all this money, and now there's a newer version of it out,
Right.
which we either have to provide a new mapping, which is a whole other. See how it becomes very complex. It was never made to go to market. And Ghostbox people don't sit down and explain every nuance with every sine wave and every sweep circuit and all the spring reverb, and they don't explain it all to you. They sell you the result, and that's what people want. Is they want the result. If we didn't explain this to them, but we gave them where the results would come from, that would be fine. But because of the way this is conceived and it's a method, we're kind of in the pickle of having to explain every aspect of the method. And it's hard.
Right. Yeah. Oh my God. Could you imagine if there was a Paranormal Geek Squad, how busy you'd be?
That's actually a good business idea now that you make me thinking about it. You have to hire some people.
Right. Exactly. Oh my goodness. That would keep everybody busy. But again, real quick, before we go, thank you for joining us. And can you let everybody know where they can find you?
Yes. No, and thank you for having me on. This is a really nice opportunity, and I appreciate being asked to do it. So we have a website, our partner's website, Tony and Sheree Rathman from the Staticon Project. They're at entityvoices.com. Lourdes and I are at Gonyac, Gonyac, paranormal.com. Gonyac comes from Gonzalez and Yacovetti, our last names together. People ask, why is her name first before mine? Because Yakgon sounds like a bug repellent, and we don't think that would fly. So it's Gonyac. We have our own individual Facebook pages. Even everything from, I have 4 books on Amazon. The link to the Amazon author page is on GonyacParanormal.com. We have a YouTube channel, Gonyac Paranormal. There's an ITC Invisible Art page on Facebook that we monitor fairly often now. And this Courtney Peterson is one of the best examples of how to be a contributing person to a community in the most selfless way. That's her. She's amazing. So that's the YouTube channel. We do a podcast Monday nights, Entity Voices Paranormal Evidence, 9 o'clock Eastern time through StreamYard, where we bring teams and people from all over the chance to show what they think is some of their best evidence, explain the who, where, how, what, why of the capture, which has been fun for us because we realize how many talented people are catching. We've seen some amazing evidence of stuff people record that is not ours,
right?
That we would not have otherwise seen through doing this. So the show has been a blast. Our partners on that also are Chris Allgood and Audrey Keeler. They're down in North Carolina, who are amazing investigators and phenomenal people. So I think that's everything. And then we have, we have Paracons and stuff coming up. We usually try to list those on the events tab on our page, including, I know we're excited about Gettysburg Battlefield Bash this year again, the Jersey Para Unity Expo we do every year, and we're doing a Get Haunted event at the Shanley Hotel with Ronnie LeBlanc from Expedition Bigfoot called the Trifecta Experience. I believe that is in May. Penhurst Paracon we're doing in May, and then September we're doing Festival of the Unexplained in the UK, which we're really excited about. They're bringing us out with the reunion of the Holzer Files, which is Cindy Kaza, Dave Schrader, Shane Pittman, a couple other folks as well, Dr. Kate Sherrill, Danny Moss, Ghost Trip Investigation, Dan Class from the Hinsdale House and from Deathwalker, and then us to go out and speak and do Staticom. So we're very, very grateful for all the things we have going on, including this today. And I told you before the show, the worst thing you can develop as a habit or skill or whatever you want to call it in the paranormal is entitlement. We don't feel like anybody owes us anything. I'm eternally grateful that you asked me to be on the show today, that we get invited to do any events, to appear, to be featured on a poster, not on a poster, whatever. It's all really, really nice that people think of us or have any regard or respect for what we're doing. So
exactly. You think the way I think in this field, and it's rare.
Yeah, I tell people every time we speak that the field's not great because we're in it. We're in it because it's great.
Right, exactly. Yep. And I always tell people, stay humble and remember where you came from. is, I think we talked about that before we started as well.
Yeah, right. I remember buying a ticket for every event that I wanted to go to, and now I'm on the poster, and people are buying tickets to come see me. Like, I don't even want to see me. Are you sure? Are you sure you want to spend your money on me?
Right.
I have a hard time doing it. I do it because I have to have clothes to walk out in public. I get that. So I spend some money on me.
Right. I completely get it.
Think of it before too, and I don't know if I could have even shared screen and shown an example of a Statacom clip. I don't know if you want to end with that.
Oh no, if you want to do that, you can. I mean, I don't think there's any shows on. I know I air on Parallax and things, but I think I'm the only daytime show they have, so we're good.
If you want to do it, I can do. Yep. I can give you one or two maybe examples of.
Yeah, and while you're pulling that up real quick, just so everyone knows, you can follow me at Exploring the Paranormal Show on Facebook, or you can catch the replay on YouTube at Heather Leigh PhD. And then next week, I will be joined by JD Hill. So make sure you guys tune in for that at 11 a.m. Eastern next week.
Very cool, and we'll share this the show out also too, because we love seeing when we appear on a show or somebody appears on our show. We love seeing the cross pollination of audiences. You know, when you'll see people that were from our audience showing up on your show, and then people from your audience will be showing up on our show, and that's how we help each other out. I think that's good.
Exactly, yeah. And when because I air live on 3 other channels, I upload it to YouTube the next day. So when it gets uploaded to YouTube, I'll have all of your links and where they can find you with that as well when I share it on YouTube and Facebook tomorrow.
Cool. Okay. All right. So I'll try to be. These are all short. I could say if you want to do like 2 or 3 that are like a minute each, maybe.
Okay.
Just as a sampling. I will end. Don't let me forget, because I could easily get distracted. I will end with one called Damnation, because that's from the Chalet Hotel. I think the radio was still the source. This is pre-Statacom. But when I was talking about how it's a minute and 8 seconds in the same voice on a rant, and I've never seen a sweeping box do that, you'll understand what I mean. All right, so this is a good one to start with. I will do this one. This one's interesting because it does 2 things. One, the voice identifies as consciousness, which is what we spent some time talking about, right?
Right.
The other thing it does is it names Tony, which is our partners in Arizona. So of all the names that could have come through it, the voice says, "I'm Tony's friend," which was really interesting. I also had to have a subsequent talk with Tony and said, "Please tell your ghost to stop interrupting my sessions." And he laughed because I'm a clown. So I'm gonna do a share screen. It's gonna be entire screen with audio, and it'll be in the green room. So when you bring it through, so we don't get that whole ripple effect, I'll switch off to the video player. Okay. There it is in the green room. Yep. All right. It should work fine for sound that comes through. This is again pure white noise, filtered and the thing that we do, I should have mentioned before in ITC, which had never been done before. Tony Sheree and Lourdes and I did it, was we took the flow of live white noise, live generated white noise, and slowed that down. Different than slowing down the sweep rate on a sweeping box. This is slowing down live white noise. It had never been done before, but the voices come in faster than we can detect, and really faster than the human vocal tract is capable of speaking. I don't care if it's an auctioneer on cocaine. Nobody can enunciate that fast. So this is also slowed down in real time, which is essentially what audio capture gets done afterwards. People will take it home, they'll denoise it, slow it down, amplify it. We're doing all that in the moment of contact. So here's the first one. Then when it identifies as consciousness, the voice.
Consciousness, already. I have Tony already. Consciousness, already. I have Tony already. Consciousness.
If you want to throw the share screen back in the waiting room, I'll leave it shared. There he goes, and I'll pull up. So this one, these are all pretty recent. This other one, also just under a minute. I started on a Windows tablet and building out Staticom with all the digital components. It became too much. And I was using like 99% of the resources. So it was skipping and sputtering and buffering. And the one night before I ended up having to replace it and get a newer gaming computer, I temporarily freed up some resources and fixed it. We came back online and recorded again. We'd stopped recording, fixed it. And I asked immediately, I went, what happened? What happened to us? And then so if you pull it back up again, this is the response I got. They spoke specifically to the problem we had. And I heard it in real time. You'll hear me respond to it, which was wild.
Maybe they're trying to connect. And since it's doing another,
I'll let it play out for a minute.
I'm gonna message her now. If that's you trying to connect to Tony and Cherie, please keep doing your thing then.
What happened here? What happened to us? Sorry about that. That's crazy, right?
Right. Yep. So you were communicating with an ITC specialist who's crossed over.
Well, that is what some people believe happens. So, you know, it's hard to know for sure, but it does certainly sound like somebody knew what was going on.
Right. I'd have been asking him, did he cause the bad connection?
We thought that was actually one of the ideas that Lourdes posed, was that maybe it was them or something that was going on. But when I looked at the corner of my digital audio workspace and it said 98, 97.9, 99, I was it was a Windows Surface Pro tablet, which is an amazing computer for internet and Outlook and all that kind of stuff. But to run high functioning audio visual processes, it doesn't have any dedicated graphics card or audio card. It's 8 gigs of integrated RAM.
Right.
So as soon as you turn it on, 3 of them are gone. So I was taxing this thing. The more we built it out to improve the sound, it was taxing it. So it couldn't handle it. But we found out that was where the problem was. So I had to get a new computer. So, all right. So I have that one. Let me close that one. All right. So actually, I'll do them back to back if you want. This one's less than a minute, and the other one's a minute, and then we'll be done.
Okay.
If you're good with that.
Yep, I'm good.
Because this last, I'll put them in this order. I think I'm going to show you one that was recorded like 2 days ago, with an improvement in the clarity of Staticom. When I asked if they were able to hear me, and then I'll go right into, without having to bring me back on or put it back in the waiting room, I'll go right into the Damnation one. That one's from the Shanley Hotel. That was still direct radio voice before we changed the name, because of the radio vacant channel was still the white noise source. But it's 1 minute and 8 seconds on a voice on a rant. It's not a compilation piece. Like, that's nonstop. I was laughing when I was reviewing it because I couldn't believe the voice was still talking. And you'll hear it when I play that 1 second. And I've never seen a sweeping box produce a message that long continuously. And I think the lack of sweep and the availability to the white noise and resonance is what allows for it. So this first one, this is very short. This is from 2 days ago, what we call in Staticom 2.0. We think we have a clarity upgrade in this.
Okay.
Can you guys hear us? We're able to now? So that's recent. This is now, I give you the longest continued recorded message that we've gotten. We've had longer conversation that went back and forth, but this is actually just one voice for a minute, almost a minute and 8 seconds.
Why are you so angry?
Not fair, I heard.
You
know what we're doing. Well, is it easier?
So there you have.
He wasn't happy.
No, he was not. One of the things that bothered me at first with that instance was that there was all the background talking. It was a Shanley hotel in the area where all the snacks and coffee, and people were just like opening Cheez-Its and stuff, and nobody was listening. These voices are coming through. So we started doing live events called Digital Seance Initiative, which is to have the focus and concentration of a seance so people are actually attentive. Their energy's all pooled in one place, kind of.
Right.
But the silver lining to the dark stuff, right, that we always talk about to look for is that you can tell that that's a continuous message nonstop, not just by the vocals being the same tone, but the background chatter is uninterrupted. You can hear like that stuff going on in the background the whole time.
Yeah, I was trying to, at first I was like, wait, there's more there than what he heard. But then I was thinking, okay, there's someone else in the other room talking.
Yeah, there was background chatter, and that was a huge wake-up call for us. That's when we started doing what's my third book's called the Digital Seance Initiative. When we started doing that, because I looked at, seances where people are all like, and I wanted that because I feel like it's easy to miss stuff. Over like 75, 80% of communication is visual,
right,
with people. So we don't have the luxury of that when we're doing this. So if you're really not paying attention and stuff is off cadence or it comes in even unsolicited, you didn't ask a question, it's easy to miss stuff. We still miss stuff even with the clarity of Staticom.
Right.
So I just wanted to try to get that out because then people go, oh, I didn't hear anything. Of course you didn't hear anything. You were knee deep in gummy bears for 45 minutes. Of course.
Oh, as long as they were good gummy bears, though. No.
That's true. That is very important. If you're going to be distracted, it needs to be quality sugar.
Yep, exactly. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. Enjoyed the clips. Great end to the show. We'll definitely have you on again, and we will definitely get you guys on Ghost Education 101 soon.
Thank you very much. It was an honor to do this. I really appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching and all your questions. We will see you next week. Have a great day.
Yeah. Come back next week and every week.
Thank you.